Hi, welcome to this video where you learn all tenses that you need in French. So this video is really for everybody learning French, for beginners, intermediate or advanced, because we will cover tenses for A1, A2, B1, B2 levels. So that's really for everybody. You can see the list here, all the tenses that we are going to cover, and I put the timestamps in the video so you can jump directly to the specific topic that you want to study. Although I would recommend you to watch the whole video because you might anyway learn something new. I always give, some tips for the conjugation or when and how to use these tenses. So you might learn something new. My name is Sebastien. I'm a French teacher. I've been teaching online for 6 years now, and I developed my own program. This is a combination of a self-study material with videos, PDF documents, exercises, and live session, where we meet once or twice a week to practice this topic. So if you like the way I explain things, then you will love my classes. So, first of all, I just want to clarify something with the personal pronoun. If you check a conjugation box, it always comes in this order. Je stands for I. Tu stands for you in an informal way. Really like for friends, family, informal. And then, il stands for he, masculine. Elle stands for she, feminine. But then we also have on. So that is a bit specific and we really use it a lot, really a lot in French. It's very convenient. That stands for they or people, but also for we. It depends on the context. If I say, en Suisse, on parle allemand, français et italien, I say here that these languages, German, French, Italian, are spoken like they, people speak. But then if I state some person, for instance, if I say, my wife and I, we are going to a movie tonight, I can also use on as a substitute for we. Ma femme et moi, on va au cinéma ce soir. But the real pronoun for we is nous. And then vous stands for you again, but in a formal way. Talking to your boss, to an elderly person, to a shop owner, for waiter in restaurants. This is a formal way, which is also to a group. So it is a you plural. And then il stands for they, masculine. Elle stands for they, feminine. So in the video, you see the conjugation. I usually put only je, tu, il, nous, vous, il. Just because it's shorter, that's easier, but obviously it stands for all these pronouns. You see also that I will talk about reflexive pronoun. So it is also important to explain what it is. In French, pretty much all verbs can be reflexive or not. Really, pretty much all of them. If I do something to somebody else or just like that, it is not reflexive. When I do something specifically to myself, it becomes reflexive. For instance, shaving. Now I shave myself. In English, you don't need a reflexive pronoun. We don't use that often in English. But in French, yes, I do to myself. It is reflexive. Je me rase. I wash my car. Je lave ma voiture. But I wash my hands. I do it for me. Then je me lave. And the reflexive pronouns are je me, tu, te, il, se, nous, nous, vous, vous, il, se. So I will also mention these reflexive verbs. It's really important. Present tense. So, really important to understand that in French, present tense, it is for present I do, but also continuous present tense I am doing. There is no continuous tense in French. It is just one for both. And no worry, there is no confusion with the context. It is totally fine. So, as in many languages, well, the most common verbs usually are irregulars. So you just need to see the conjugation and learn them. Verbs such as to be, to have, to go, well, they are irregular. But here, let's talk about the conjugation for all other verbs, all regular verbs. They are divided into 3 groups. First one is the main one. All the verbs in ground form ending with ER. And there are really many. To speak, parler. To walk, marcher. To work, travailler. To love, aimer. So it's really a long list, and they all conjugate the same way. What I do is that I remove the ending ER and I add these endings. Pay attention to the pronunciation because most of these letters don't sound. Now, the final E doesn't sound, S either, or T or D. Usually they don't sound. Je parle, tu parles, il parle, nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle. And then we have the second group. It's not as big as the first one. All the verbs ending with IR. To finish, finir. To choose, choisir. To slow down, ralentir. They conjugate the same way. We remove the IR and we add these endings. Je finis, tu finis, il finit, nous finissons, vous finissez, ils finissent. And then the third group. Verbs ending with RE. Also DRE. And also OIR. Well, here it's a bit more complicated because the third group has many small exceptions. Often there is like a letter like adding or a letter removing. So my advice here is, well, get the sense of the language. I know it's hard at the beginning, but then with the time it comes. You will see, well, what are the most likely endings, the most likely letters, and we can really narrow down a lot. Je. Pretty much the only possibilities is an S or an X. And that's the same for tu, S or X. And then il, elle, on, the only possible letters are D or T. So with that, we really narrow down the possibilities, and that's even easier with nous, because it's always ONS. Vous, always EZ. Il, elle, plural, ENT. With that, you can easily really figure out the conjugation. And then, there are some letters coming in or going out, but with the time, you get this sense. With that now, based on present tense, we have imperative. Imperative, it is a direct speech. Well, it's an order, for instance, like do this, stop, wait. Or a recommendation. Think about it. Take your time. It's also an invitation. Please come in, sit down. But anyway, it is direct. So it works only with tu, nous, vous. It is based on present tense. So let's use the verb to speak again. So now if I want to make imperative like, yeah, speak up. What I do here is that I just remove the personal pronoun and I use the verb. Parle, parlons, parlez. You see that parlons, nous, well, in English it is let's speak. In French, I don't need let's, just parlons. One little thing, you see that, well, the S, the final S for tu disappear, but it doesn't change the sound. One thing also, negative. That is also important. Negative, there are plenty of negative adverbs, expression. But here, let's use only not or don't. In French, it is ne pas. Yeah, there is a double negative. Ne before the verb, pas after the verb. In present tense, that would be je ne parle pas, tu ne parles pas, il ne parle pas, nous ne parlons pas, vous ne parlez pas, il ne parle pas. Imperative, well, we keep the same structure. Ne before the verb, pas after the verb. So don't speak would be ne parle pas. Let us not speak. Ne parlons pas. And don't speak to a group of formal, ne parlez pas. And now, well, with reflexive verb, how does that work? Well, the reflexive pronoun remain in the structure. Not the personal pronoun, but the reflexive pronoun, yes. And te transform into toi. And it goes after the verb with a dash. So, a reflexive verb, for instance, wake up. Se réveiller. Present tense. Je me réveille. Tu te réveilles. Il se réveille. Nous nous réveillons. Vous vous réveillez. Il se réveille. Imperative, then it becomes réveille-toi. Réveillons-nous. Réveillez-vous. But it's slightly different now with negative. Negative imperative, well, the reflexive pronoun remains exactly the same. And it goes before the verb, so then don't wake up becomes ne te réveille pas. Ne nous réveillons pas. Ne vous réveillez pas. Past tenses now. There are many, but you actually only need two. They cover pretty much everything. Passé composé, perfect tense. Imparfait, imperfect. They give different information. First, let's see exactly when to use one or the other. Passé composé, perfect tense, is just an action done. So, in English, here you already have like two tenses. I have done or I did. Well, in French, passé composé covers both already because it is the same if something, well, happened recently, just now, or some time ago, or really long ago. So it is something just, okay, I did, I have done. Imparfait, on the other hand, cover like more situation. First, we have like a description or a state. When I say like, this house was blue. Yesterday I was tired. Okay, so let's take a story here. For instance, description states when I was a child. That's imperfect. And then we have a repeated action. In English, that would be I used to. So when I was a child, I used to go to school by bike. And also then we have a continuous action, like I was doing. When I was a child, I used to go to school by bike. One day I was riding very fast and I fell on the ground. You see here, I fell on the ground, that's just an action. So actually that would be perfect tense, passé composé. So you see that we can really mix. We can use both in the same sentence just because they provide different information. Let's see an example here. First sentence, present tense. En Colombie, je bois le meilleur café du monde depuis 10 ans. In Colombia, I drink the best coffee in the world since 10 years. Well, I use present tense because even though I started 10 years ago, I still do it. It's not over, then it is not past tense. In English, you could say like I have been drinking. It is also like a past form. Not in French. It is present tense here. Second sentence, I use passé composé. En Colombie, j'ai bu le meilleur café du monde. So here, well, that's just an experience. I did it. On holiday, on a trip, well, it was an experience. Third sentence, I use imparfait. En Colombie, je buvais le meilleur café du monde. So here, it is past tense, so I stopped because I'm not in Colombia anymore, or maybe this coffee is no longer available anyway. Somehow I stopped drinking it, but it was a habit, a repeated action. Okay, so here, let's see now the conjugation. First, passé composé. What we have is subject, auxiliary verb, and the past participle. So it's very similar to I have done, for instance. The difference is that in French, we have two auxiliary verbs. Yes, avoir, être. So to have, to be. So there is a list of verbs and you just need to remember them. So avoir, it is the main one for pretty much all verbs. And that's just the regular conjugation. And I put the past participle. For instance, I watched, you watched. J'ai regardé, tu as regardé, il a regardé, nous avons regardé, vous avez regardé, ils ont regardé. Here, just a little tip to conjugate, to figure out the past participle. That's the verb in its past form. You remember the three groups. So, the verb's first group ending with ER, the past form is E accent. For instance, parler, past tense, parler. You see the pronunciation? It is important with present tense because when I say I speak, I don't pronounce the last E, je parle, because if you do je parlais, then, well, I hear past tense. So that's really important to hear the pronunciation. Then, second group, the verbs ending with IR, they usually just end with I. Finir, fini. Choisir, choisi. And the third group, verbs ending with RE, DRE, OIR, they end with the letter U. Lire, lu. Descendre, descendu. Voir, vu. So now the auxiliary verb, être. There is just a list. Here is the list. And you need to just remember. And we conjugate with verb être. Je suis allé, tu es allé, il est allé, nous sommes allés, vous êtes allés, ils sont allés. You've noticed that with verb auxiliaire être, then I have to accord the past participle, singular, plural, masculine, feminine. Yeah, that is the difference. So this is really the short list. Have you noticed here, it's pretty much all about movement. This is a tip here, but this is not a rule because some verbs also about personal movement, they use verb auxiliaire avoir, such as nager, to swim, marcher, to walk, sauter, to jump. Okay, but beside that is really about movement. And it's also about transformation. For instance, well, to be born or to die, it is a transformation, yeah. But to that list, I must add all reflexive verbs. Yes. So, for instance, if I say that I woke up this morning at 7 and I woke the kids up at 8, one is reflexive, but not the other one. I woke myself up. Je me suis réveillé à 7 heures. But then I woke the kids, not reflexive. Et j'ai réveillé les enfants à 8 heures. One more thing, this is really like the short list, but you also must remember that in French we use like prefixes. It is like a pre-part that just give an additional information to the verb. You know, the most common one is re. Like in English, now I do and I redo. It means re, like back or again. So when I say that I came, je suis venu. But if I say that I came back, je suis revenu. You know, there is a prefix, but this is the same verb, really. Like the source is anyway venir, to come. We also have to become, devenir, that also use verb auxiliaire, être. There is still one thing really specific with passé composé. Well, that's the position of adverbs. Because the adverbs, they go in between. So, if I say that I worked, j'ai travaillé. If I say that I worked a lot, well, beaucoup go in between. J'ai beaucoup travaillé. If I say, well, negative, then that I didn't work. So, ne is before the auxiliary verb and pas after the auxiliary verb. I didn't work, je n'ai pas travaillé. There is a reason for that now, because if I put like pas really at the end, je n'ai travaillé pas, you see, it really sounds a lot like present tense. Present tense, like I don't work, je ne travaille pas. So past tense, je n'ai travaillé pas, it's really close. So that's the reason why really all these adverbs, in general, and negative adverbs, they go like in between. Je n'ai pas travaillé. And I can add other ones. If I say that I didn't work very well, je n'ai pas très bien travaillé. Everything in between, that's just really clearer, like really for understanding. Okay, and then, so, imparfait. Imperfect tense, the conjugation is based on, so this is the root, present tense, nous, oui. And I use the radical. So that means that I conjugate the verb in present tense nous and I remove ONS. And I add the following ending. Let's take a verb that really changes. If I take the verb to drink, see present tense, je bois, tu bois, il boit, nous buvons, vous buvez, ils boivent. So I use nous buvons, I remove ONS, buve. And that is the radical, the root for imperfect. Je buvais, tu buvais, il buvait, nous buvions, vous buviez, il buvait. Let's take another one, connaître, to know personally. Je connais, tu connais, il connaît, nous connaissons, vous connaissez, ils connaissent. Then I use nous connaissons, connaissent, je connaissais, tu connaissais, il connaissait, nous connaissions, vous connaissiez, il connaissait. To that tense, there is only one irregular verb, that's the verb to be, être. Just that's the only one. We don't use nous sommes. Here we use the verb itself, like être, and I take et. But the endings are the same. J'étais, tu étais, il était, nous étions, vous étiez, ils étaient. There is just one more thing that I want to explain with past tense. Here, there is sometimes a confusion with the perfect tense, passé composé. Because when I say that it's an action done, it doesn't always mean that it is a single action. It can be like several actions, but that are clearly done. For instance, if I say that in my life, I traveled a lot. I visited many countries. You can say that is not a single action because I visited many countries. But I look back, I can see my life. I look back and my traveling days are gone, are long gone. So anyway, it counts as an experience in my life. And I use passé composé. Now, if I zoom in, this is how I call it, zoom out, zoom in. Now, let's say that I zoom in a specific period in my life. For instance, when I was a student. So by then, my traveling days were not over. It doesn't matter when I started and I stopped because when I was a student, it was a habit. So then here, when I was student, I used to travel a lot. I use imparfait. Quand j'étais étudiant, je voyageais beaucoup, je visitais beaucoup de pays. I said that, well, past tense, we can cover with only these two. Passé composé, imparfait. I just want to add another one which is really useful. It is plus que parfait, plus qu'imperfect. That is in the past, an event before another one. For instance, we see each other today. What did you do yesterday? I watched a movie. What movie? The movie you had recommended me. You see, there is 2 steps. The structure is really easy. It is similar as passé composé, but the auxiliary verb is imparfait. So, avoir, j'avais, tu avais, il avait, nous avions, vous aviez, ils avaient. For instance, hier soir, j'ai regardé un film, le film que tu avais recommandé. That's really an easy structure. Just remember that we also have 2 auxiliary verbs. With movement, then it uses a verb auxiliaire être. So, plus que parfait, I need to do accordingly. So, if the verb use verb auxiliaire être, I need to put it auxiliary verb imperfect as well. Je suis allé à Paris. I went to Paris. A city that I had been many times. Donc, je suis allé à Paris, une ville où j'étais allé souvent. Okay, so the structure is really easy, but, well, I maintain what I say. You can really do pretty much everything with only passé composé, imparfait. We don't use that one, past imperfect, that often, but it might be useful sometime. Another past tense here, very quickly, passé récent. So, well, recent past, it is something that really just happened now. The structure is a bit weird because we use the verb to come, venir, with the preposition de, and another verb in its ground form. So it sounds or it looks like I came to do something, but no, it means that I just did. For instance, I just finished the work. Je viens de finir le travail. The game just started. Le match vient de commencer. So this is really a specific structure when we need to express that something was just now. And with that, now I can talk about future tense. Future tense, there are two. Well, there are many, but you only need two. It is near future tense and simple future. Again, before the conjugation, let's see really the difference. Well, it exists the same in English, but we don't use exactly the same. It is very similar to I'm going to do or I will do. So we have these two. So, futur proche, je vais faire. Futur simple, je ferai. Let's see exactly the difference. If I say, for instance, I'm going to watch a movie or I will watch a movie. Je vais regarder un film, je regarderai un film. It seems to be the same, but really the difference is the probability. How likely is something to happen? Obviously, near future, as it implies, it is something that is really soon in time, so the probability is higher. So tonight, I'm going to watch a movie. But it's not only about time, it's also about commitment. Now, the same sentence, but I put tonight. Ce soir, je vais regarder un film. Ce soir, je regarderai. So you see, it is not about time. It's really about commitment. Let's say that tonight I'm going to watch a movie. It means that it's my plan. This is going to happen. If a friend calls me just to go out and have a drink, I'll say no because I already have a plan. Futur simple, simple future, je regarderai. Well, there is no commitment here. It is more like if I'm home, not doing anything, I'll probably end up watching the movie. But if a friend calls me, well, to go out and have a drink, then I'll say yes, because I have no commitment to the movie. I know in English it's not exactly like that because we use like I'll watch, I'll do really easily. But in French, this difference is much more like marked, is much more important. Je vais faire, I'm committed. The structure, really easy. We use the verb aller and another verb in its grand form. And there is no preposition in between. Now, it's not like English, I'm going to watch. In French, it's really like I'm going watch. Je vais regarder. Tu vas regarder. Il va regarder. Nous allons regarder. Vous allez regarder. Ils vont regarder. And that's it. Futur simple. So, the grammar here, the conjugation. Well, the conjugation is based on the verb grand form with the following endings. Regarder remains regarder, and I add je regarderai, tu regarderas, il regardera, nous regarderons, vous regarderez, ils regarderont. And just like that. Well, the only problem with that tense is that there are many irregular verbs. Yeah, so look for them like in the conjugation books. And again, that are like the most common verbs. For instance, to be. To be is je serai, tu seras, il sera, nous serons, vous serez, ils seront. So you see, there are many irregular verbs. But, hey, there is one thing here is that what you learn for futur simple is useful because it's the same for conditional. Actually, conditional is based on the future tense. It means that all regular verbs in present tense are the same. No? I said être, to be. So then conditional I would be, then is je serais, tu serais, il serait, nous serions, vous seriez, il serait. These endings, does that ring a bell? You know, like conditional, well, we use, well, when there is a condition, of course, but we also use in a polite form. For instance, I would like a coffee. So the verb like, aimer. Conditional. J'aimerais, tu aimerais, il aimerait, nous aimerions, vous aimeriez, ils aimeraient. And there is another one with the verb, well, want, vouloir, which is also irregular. Je voudrais, tu voudrais, il voudrait, nous voudrions, vous voudriez, il voudrait. Conditional here is used, well, for polite form, but is also used, well, with a condition. So here it works really pretty much like English, so that's easy to understand. The condition, so if, is imperfect, and then the result, the likely outcome, is conditional. So then if I say that if I had money, I would buy a car. So if I had imperfect, si j'avais l'argent, and then conditional, I would buy a car. Buy, acheter, conditional, no? J'achèterais une voiture. Conditional, let's see exactly how it works here, because conditional is not always mandatory. It really depends, well, the situation. Let's say now that there is an invitation to travel, to go on holiday. I just don't know yet. I don't know if I have the money. So, same thing in English, no? If I have the money, I go on holiday with you. Because it is, well, present and possible. I just have to check. Donc, si j'ai l'argent, je pars en voyage avec toi. But then, I use the conditional when I know that, well, the condition is missing. So it is present, the outcome, but, it is impossible because something is missing. So, well, sorry, I can't go on holiday. If I had the money, I would go. Si j'avais l'argent, j'irais en voyage. And that also brings me now to the past conditional. So, past conditional, the structure. Well, let's see that past conditional, it is the subject, auxiliary verb, conditional, and the past participle. The thing here, well, you see that because the condition if is imperfect, then if it's really past, I need to go one step further. Remember that here, then we use plus que parfait. So, in a sense that still I have this invitation to travel, well, I check, I don't have money, I don't go. The person goes on holiday, come back, and I say, well, yes, that's too bad. I would have loved. Well, if I had the money, I would have gone with you on a holiday. Si j'avais eu l'argent, je serais parti en voyage avec toi. Here, I used verb auxiliaire être because partir, movement. Yes. So we just use this auxiliary verb in conditional. And then we have the past participle, have we seen, as you remember. And actually here, the structure is always the same. And that is an advantage because in English, some verbs really have a different structure. I'm thinking about should, could. The structure is different. If I say that, well, if you had told me, I could have helped you. You see, the structure here is a bit complicated. Well, in French, well, no, I use the verb, well, could, can, pouvoir, in its past form. Well, that one is irregular. Now, pouvoir, pu. Si tu avais appelé, donc, j'aurais pu aider. And then help just remains a grand form. It's not in past. Now, I could have helped. No, here is really that I would have could helping you. You see, so it's really always the same structure. Past conditional, well, is not very useful. We don't use that often. But anyway, I put it here in the list because it is useful for certain situations that are really good to know. In English also, like, yeah, you should have told me. No, you could have done that. That are really useful sentences. In French, that would be tu aurais dû me dire. J'aurais pu t'aider. I would have wanted. J'aurais voulu faire ça. And also, we use this conditional, with like the condition. Like, oh, if only I had known. No? For instance, si j'avais su. I just use like the condition and not like the outcome or the results, but it goes with. And here I use plus que parfait. You remember when I said that there is no continuous tense in French? Well, that's not entirely true. Well, there is something called participe présent et gérondif. So it is like a verb really similar to like the continuous tense, doing. And the ending in French is ant. So, yeah, it is a continuous tense, but we use that in really specific situation. Not exactly in a sentence like, I am doing the work. No, but sometimes we need it. It's really convenient. If I want to say, well, for instance, in the train, you can hear like the speakers saying like, all passenger traveling to Paris must change train in Lyon. Like, for instance. So here there is a continuous tense, like all passengers traveling. I'm not using with the personal pronoun like they are traveling. So this form, just traveling, also exists in French, and that is participe présent. This sentence would be les passagers voyageants à Paris doivent changer de train à Lyon. Voyageant. The structure here, it is based on present tense nous, radical, so we remove the ONS and we add ANT. So, speaking. Nous parlons, parle, parlant. Okay, people speaking French are welcome in Québec. Donc, les gens parlant le français sont bienvenus au Québec. Okay. So, some verbs in present tense you see that are kind of irregular. We did the example with drink. Nous buvons. Donc, buve, buvons. And that brings me to gérondif. Gérondif is very useful when we want to explain an action with another action. For instance, I work while drinking coffee. Je travaille en buvant un café. So you see, I'm mixing two actions, and that's really useful. I just use participe présent but with the preposition en, like while doing. Je marche en téléphonant. I walk while talking on the phone. So it is not exactly continuous tense, as you know in English, like I am doing, but in some situation that is very, very useful. And last but not least, okay, this is really like the dark beast. This is not a tense, it is like a mood. It is the subjunctive mood. It is based on present tense, and I know that one is really, complicated and frustrating because it doesn't exist in English, or at least not the same way. In English, like if I were you, that is subjunctive, but we don't use it that way in French. In French, subjunctive is when we express a desire, a will, a wish, or a doubt. It gives this additional information. And yeah, it's really hard to spot it or really to know exactly when to use it. But there is a simple trick, I think. So here, the trick is to think about like a interaction with a consequence. Yes, just like that. So I give you an example here. You see, I organize a party and then I want my friend to come. So here you see there is an interaction and there is a possible consequence, because that he comes is important. He doesn't come, I'm disappointed. So then I use the subjunctive mode here. So then the sentence is not just present tense. Je veux qu'il vienne à ma fête. Well, here, no. I need to use the subjunctive. Je veux qu'il vienne à ma fête. You have to really distinguish here like the wishes, but really like the link and consequence with just an information. Same thing. I organize a party and then, I just think that friend is coming. I just think, but it's not really important. It doesn't affect me if he comes or not. And then I just say, je pense qu'il vient à ma fête. You see that here is just an information, present tense, there is no subjunctive mode here. Really, maybe another example so you can understand better. Il semble que c'est la meilleure solution. Present tense. Il semble que ce soit la meilleure solution. Subjunctive. It's pretty much the same thing, but you can see that one is really just an information. I think that's the best solution. That's just like that. There's nothing to do and okay, no consequence. But if I use here the subjunctive, il semble que ce soit la meilleure solution. Okay, here there is an action, so that we have to implement this solution with a possible positive, negative outcome. So you see that's really just a different information. Just information or link, interaction, and consequence. And how does that work? So, here the conjugation is, the subjunctive is based on third person plural, present tense, radical. For instance, je viens, tu viens, il vient, nous venons, vous venez, ils viennent. So I use ils viennent. I remove the ent, and that is the root for subjunctive. Donc, que je vienne, que tu viennes, qu'ils viennent, que nous venions, que vous veniez, qu'ils viennent. Hold on, because here it seems that there is a irregular verb. So, there are many verbs like that, there is a difference, like with the singular pronoun or the plural. Let me add another rule. So, third person plural, ils viennent, that works for je, tu, il pluriel. But then let's take radical nous, only for nous, vous. And you see here that anyway, present tense, it is nous venons. So the subjunctive becomes nous venions, que vous veniez. Let's take another one. I know I use a lot this verb like to drink because it is slightly irregular. So that's really perfect to see all these differences. Present tense. Je bois, tu bois, il boit. Nous buvons, vous buvez, ils boivent. So, let's take the two different. And that becomes que je boive, que tu boives, qu'ils boivent, que nous buvions, que vous buviez, qu'ils boivent. And here we go. So, well, thank you for watching the video until here. So I wish you really all the best for, well, learning French. And, well, if you like the way I explain things, well, check my webpage. There is a program especially designed with a combination of self-learning material, videos, PDF document exercises, and live classes. Thank you very much. See you soon.